Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Very Cold Lasagna podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Lasagna, and this is episode number 228 of this icy yet spicy podcast for all the filthy casual takes on the world of sports. In this episode, we're here for another edition of our weekly roundup around the 2024 NFL season as we first make our way towards the week that was, which was this past week, week number 10, and make our way looking ahead to the week that will be, which this week will be week number 11, previewing all the games that are to come in the upcoming week and another game of action in this season in the NFL. So, that being said, before we get started with today's episode, make sure you follow Very Cold Lasagna on social media, wherever I'm at, whether it's on Twitter or Instagram at Very Cold Lasagna. And if you're listening to this wherever you get your podcasts on audio, make sure you rate and review the show, leave me some feedback, leave me some nice comments, or maybe some not so nice comments, and as well as a 1 to 5 star rating. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you smash the like button, smash the subscribe button if you're not already. Leave a comment down below with your own takes on what I'm talking about in each and every episode. In this case, it's this past week in the NFL, week number 10, and the week that will be week number 11, with your predictions, picks, and what your expectations are for your own team that is going to be playing, or maybe they're on a bye week, and what you're hoping for in their return in the following week. So make sure you like, comment, share, and most importantly, subscribe, and smash that notification bell too, so you'll be notified of each and every upload that comes their way from Very Cold Lasagna. And speaking of share, make sure you share this with your friends, share this with your neighbor, share this with a stranger, share this with your coworkers, with just about anybody, about the good, the bad, the ugly, about Very Cold Lasagna. That being said, let's get into the week that was first about this 2024 NFL season. Another week of action in this past season. I'm kind of feeling, for about half of this season, to be honest with you, I'm kind of having some. Let's have an honest conversation with this this season so far. There's been a lot of duds. There's been a lot of duds in this 2024 campaign. And I don't know what I'm not sure what the exact pinpoint is, but the quality of play has been, for at least most of the part, it's been very substandard, or maybe it's just, me being a filthy casual fan. Maybe I'm just my expectations are either too high or too low, or maybe I'm just like multitasking on certain games. I don't know. But either way, it's just like, damn. Like, I don't know. It's just something about some of these games, these last couple of weeks, aside from one standout week in between. It's just something's not clicking. Something's just not clicking with a lot of these games lately. So this week was no exception. It was just another mid-week outside of a few standout games. Like, they really got to ramp up the pace, man. I think it's kind of like WWE right now. I think of it as like wrestling right now. It's in that slow period, and then they start ramping it up in December. I'm just waiting to get to the most important time of the year, like Christmas. It's the most wonderful time of the year, just with football. When you start thinking about playoffs, or for at least for more than half of the league, Cancun. So yeah, that's how I felt about this past week, especially, just getting ready for December football. I mean, we are 2 weeks away, by the way, for that. But let's first talk about week 10, because we got to get through that. So looking at the slate for this past week, we had more teams on vacay this week. Those teams include the Browns, the Packers, the Raiders, and the Seahawks. So if your teams were on vacay, well, you probably were too. So you'll see them in action next week. So kicking things off with Thursday Night Football only for that Jeff Bezos money, pal. the Baltimore Ravens managed to top the Cincinnati Bengals, storming back from a 21-7 deficit, but they had to endure a fourth quarter shootout with Cincinnati. Cincinnati, man, they could have won this game. They really could have won this game, but I felt like Zach Taylor got really over-aggressive in this game. He made a lot of big decisions in this game, and some of those big decisions came back to haunt him. Whether it was the lack of field goals and going for it on fourth down a lot, and the way he ended this game really bit him in the butt. So he bit the dealer's hand with going for two after they managed to get it within one with the touchdown, but he failed. Now, granted, there was a uncalled face mask penalty, but to be honest with you, why did you go for two in the first place? Now, granted, I get it. You can't. The defenses in that game were pretty awful, but maybe you should have called a different play. Maybe Joe Burrow should have ran out of the pocket. Either way, going for two, a bit greedy. Baltimore gets the season sweeping win, 35-34 in a pretty crazy game of sorts. But man, that very crappy defense for the Ravens. It took a big hit with Kyle Hamilton's ankle injury. I'm not sure at the time of this recording he'll be okay. If he'll be out for the next one, but not having him in another critical division matchup is gonna hurt if he's gonna be out. So they gotta hope he's okay. So looking at the Sunday slate of games, starting with the early morning portion, and well, if you woke up for this game, I don't feel sorry for you. And that game happened to be the Carolina Panthers taking on the New York Giants in Munich, Germany. The final international game of the season. The Giants came back from a 17-7 deficit to force overtime. Why they wanted to go to overtime, I don't know. But the Giants, unfortunately, they paid the price for going to overtime because Tyrone Tracy of the Giants fumbled on their very first and only snap in the extra period as Eddie Pinheiro made easy dinero for the Carolina Panthers with the game-winning field goal to win it for them 20-17 and get their third win of the year. So, yeah, the Carolina Panthers got their third win. Bryce Young played okay again in that game. So, he's making some okay tape for whoever wants to trade him next year. So not really much to take away from the Panthers. And honestly, not really too much to take away from the Giants other than the fact that for the first half, they played terribly. Especially Daniel Jones. He really was awful in that first half against a very crappy Carolina team. Like, seriously? No wonder why they're considering a quarterback change after the bye. So it wouldn't surprise me if they went to Drew Lock once they get out of the bye week when they face Tampa Bay, I believe. That's when they next play. So down in Soldier Field, the New England Patriots managed to pull off a upset of sorts. The normally bad Patriots defense, they sacked Caleb Williams 6 times. Drake May looked better than his counterpart, Caleb, despite having much less to work with, as the Patriots pulled off an upset over the Bears, 19-3. So Drake May looking far more comfortable in that game, looking more poised, despite having the crappier offensive line, and he was willing to use his legs much more if need be. Then, yeah, that helped the Pats get this upset win. So, I mean, yeah, the Patriots are still a very bad team, but for at least that week, like, they really outclassed the Bears in that one. Meanwhile, the Bears, like, oof, like, what has happened to them these last, like, couple of weeks? Like, yeah, Caleb has had his struggles with accuracy, getting the ball out faster, but it's like the defense has also had the troubles too. Like, they can barely get to the quarterback. They've had trouble covering receivers. Like, what's happening over there with the Bears? Now, granted, they did fire Shane Waldron with the way he's being ultra conservative with Caleb and his questionable play calling, as if that's been the norm in Chicago. But it's not looking good for the Bears. It's like maybe they're back to where their expectations were supposed to be before the season started. Considering this big showdown next week against the Green Bay Packers, this stretch of games, if they wanted to make a little bit of a surprise run in the NFC North, well, this is another one of those games that they should have had, yet they didn't. Very rough for the Bears. Meanwhile, down in Indy, the host site, whatever you want to flip the words around, the host site for next year's Royal Rumble, the Bills defense, well, they certainly put the Royal Rumble on Joe Flacco, picking him off 3 times, getting one of them on a pick 6 at the very beginning of the game. Josh Allen and the offense, they took care of their end of the bargain with a Royal Rumble on the horseshoe, beating the Colts 30-20 in that game. Nice performance by the Bills, even though they didn't have Keon Coleman and Amari Cooper in that game. And also a turnover-riddled day from Josh Allen, but still very effective on both sides of the ball. So you can't really complain too much when they still performed relatively nicely. Meanwhile, for the Colts, they got to stop being stubborn with this shit. Trying out Joe Flacco, having that kind of performance for, what is it, the second or third straight game, and he's throwing picks left and right. He's sitting there in the pocket, and granted, he's 39 years old, but Anthony Richardson is your future. You want to at least hope he's your future because, he's erratic. He's turning over the football. If not more frequently or as frequently as Flacco. He's erratic. But still, you want to at least get this guy reps because that was the whole point of this season. Getting the lost reps that he didn't get last year because he was injured. The Shane Steichen and the Colts need to stop being stubborn and put Anthony Richardson back in as starter. Enough is enough, man. You're going to lose the locker room eventually if you haven't already. So you might as well go back to Anthony Richardson before it's too late. Meanwhile, down in the land of all elite, the Vikings certainly escaped it with the win in spite of Sam Darnold's 3 end zone interceptions. What the hell was that, man? But the Vikings managed to beat the all elite Jacksonville Jaguars 12-7, despite not really scoring in the end zone. All of the points came on field goals. And if I'm the Vikings, I would be very wary of Sam Darnold's recent careless decision making. So they really need Darnold to clean that up. Otherwise, it's going to be the downfall of their season and potentially their playoff chances if they run into a better opponent. Meanwhile, for the all elite Jaguars, they're not really going anywhere at this point this season, if at all. They're 2-8 now. 2-7, 2-8. Math me on that. 2-8. We're 10 weeks in now, pal. But anyway, at this point, you're looking for silver linings. You're looking at silver linings for the future, and they're not many, but look at the way their defense played this game. Pretty solid. Pretty solid, if you ask me. Limiting the Vikings to just field goals, intercepting Sam Darnold 3 times in the red zone. So, that's a start, I suppose. So, going forward, just look for silver linings on what you can do going towards next year. Meanwhile, down in Kansas City, it was a very tight game. Surprisingly, for an AFC West showdown between the Chiefs and the Broncos, and Denver almost had it because Will Lutz, he was about to give the Kansas City Chiefs their first loss of the year, but by hell and high water, somehow, he had his game-winning field goal blocked. He had it blocked, and Kansas City and their undefeated streak lived for another day as the Chiefs escaped by the skin of their teeth over the Broncos 16-14. And yeah, that was a very tough pill to swallow if you're a Broncos fan and, well, the Broncos themselves. They gave the Chiefs probably their toughest outing yet. Yeah, I mean, aside from the Bucs a couple of days ago, but they were like the closest. Like they were literally that close to an upset, and it just wasn't to be with that kind of luck. And I know there are no moral victories in the NFL or in sports in general, but if Denver fans want to look at any positives from this game, well, I'd say look at how Bo Nix played in this game. He didn't quiver. He didn't like crawl into a ball in this game. He played his best, probably his best game. Like, sure, the stats don't show it, but like he didn't really crumble all that much under pressure against the best team in the NFL, against the best quarterback in the NFL and Patrick Mahomes. And that defense took the champions to their very limit in this game. So again, no moral victories, but this Denver team that, you know, I certainly thought that wasn't really going anywhere this season, but no, they did pretty damn good in this game. Meanwhile, for the Chiefs, they escape again with the victory, going 9-0. But, you know, as with last week, coming out of that game against Tampa, you know, they got to be careful with how Patrick Mahomes is, you know, health-wise, with not only how much he got sacked in this game, but how he's moving around with that, trying to play through that ankle injury. So, you know, just be wary of how he is with his health. So, just something to keep in mind. Meanwhile, down in the big hard, the New Orleans Saints managed to get some revenge and a little bit of an upset, beating the Atlanta Falcons 20-17. Derek Carr threw to Marquez Valdez-Scantling's way. I didn't even know he was on the team now. But nonetheless, he threw it to his way twice before fending off a last-minute comeback from the Falcons to snap their own 7-game losing skid. So, at least for this week, the coaching change from Dennis Allen to special teams coordinator Dennis Rizzi, it worked somewhat. So, the Saints, they played with a lot more energy, at least in the first half. And then, of course, they had to fend off that last-minute comeback attempt. They played a good enough defense there. So, we'll see how it goes next week. I'm not expecting a whole lot for the Saints going forward. I still feel like they got to totally blow it up, especially with that fucking salary cap hell that they're in. But either way, you know, we'll see if Darren Rizzi is the answer head coach, but probably not. Meanwhile, for the Atlanta Falcons, like, I thought this is the game that they're supposed to have, and like they imploded. They imploded in this one. Like, very sloppy play. There was a lot of drives that they couldn't finish, and Younghoe Koo, he was very off in this game. He missed three out of 4 of his kicks that he normally usually makes, which indicates that he had a pretty bad game. And then Kirk Cousins airmailing a lot of his throws, which led to a lot of missed opportunities for touchdowns. And then there's whatever the hell that last drive was for the Falcons in that last-ditch effort to make a comeback. So, I mean, yeah, the Falcons lost this game. I still expect them to win this division, but barring some late-season collapse that causes them to not win the division, they play like that when it really matters the most. And if they make the playoffs, yeah, they're one and done. Meanwhile, down in Tampa, speaking of the NFC South, Jake Moody redeemed himself of sorts in his return game from a terrible day at the office with a buzzer-beating field goal to lift the San Francisco 49ers over the Tampa Bay Bucks 23-20. And my God, I talked about this in my separate recap video of the 49ers game over the Bucks, so I'm not gonna like go full ham on it, like crash out like I'm gonna do in this one. But the Niners had 2 weeks to prepare for this shit, and literally it's the same shit that we saw in the first 8 games of the year. Like poor offensive line play, poor special teams play, especially. Like, they didn't have any, like, they didn't fix most of that shit. Like, really? I mean, it's good to have Christian McCaffrey back, but it's like he doesn't fix a lot of the problems on the other side of the ball. He doesn't fix the red zone issues, the red zone play calling. It's like, what the hell? Like 2 weeks to prepare, and we're still getting the same lackadaisical shit from San Francisco. So a walk-off field goal win, a sloppy one at that, it's nothing to celebrate, people. Meanwhile, for the Bucs, this loss is certainly harming to them. It's like a 5-game losing streak that they're on now. But I feel like this bye week that they're going to go on, I feel like it comes at a good time for them. Sure, yeah, they're 4-6 now, but this is a good time for them to get healthy and hopefully try it. Like once they come back, they can try to get their season back on track. And it's a long shot, but if they can go on a little bit of a run and try to keep pace with the Atlanta Falcons, hell, maybe they could try something. But they do have to monitor the health of their top lineman, Tristan Wirfs, who left the game with an MCL sprain, which is another big loss to them. So, oof. But they have to hope to get some kind of bodies back. Meanwhile, down in the nation's capital, in a big test for the Washington Commanders, unfortunately, they fell just a little bit short because Russell Wilson and the Steelers stormed back from a 10-point deficit with Wilson's lobber to new teammate Mike Williams being the exclamation point in that comeback to help the Pittsburgh Steelers outlast the Commanders 28-27 in a pretty exciting matchup there. And don't look now, people, but the Steelers look like a pretty legitimate threat in the AFC. The front seven is an actual force against opposing quarterbacks. Like that defense can go right at you. Very, very physical. And surprisingly, Russell Wilson has been playing at a very good level. He hasn't really cracked yet. But yeah, the Steelers are looking pretty damn good right now. But the first big test is going to come next week against the Baltimore Ravens. And the Steelers still got plenty of division games left to go. But we're going to see what these Steelers are really made of the rest of the way. And that starts next week against the Baltimore Ravens. Meanwhile, for Jay Daniels and the Commanders, pretty tough loss here. And they almost could have had it if they converted that fourth down, which unfortunately didn't go their way. But they get a bit of a wake-up call of sorts in this one. They're still a pretty young team. But hopefully, like for them, they can bounce back of sorts, starting with their next big test we'll talk about in the second part of this episode. So, yeah, not exactly the best loss that they want to have, but hopefully it won't serve as a demoralizing one in their next game. Starting with the late afternoon slate of games down in the powder blue side of Los Angeles, as Justin Herbert and the offense, they were pretty good. Again, with a 2-touchdown showing from their quarterback to beat Will Levis and the Tennessee Titans. The Chargers get the victory 27-17, and they've been very sneaky quiet as of late. They've been very sneaky good. Maybe it has to do with the quality of opponents that they had, but I mean, again, you play who you play on your schedule. But you know, when you look at that Chargers offense, it's been pretty balanced, if you ask me. A rushing attack in Gus Edwards, who just came back from injury, and J.K. Dobbins. And you got emerging threats in Quinn Johnson and Ladd McConkey. Yeah, Justin Herbert's establishing some pretty good chemistry and some good connections with all of them to greatly help out the offense. So Justin Herbert's been getting some weapons to turn this Chargers team into a quiet playoff threat. So, yeah, we'll be interested to see how the Chargers do, and especially once they get some tougher opponents later down the season. Meanwhile, down in the desert, the Arizona Cardinals, they easily decided to take care of business as Kyler Murray rushed for 2 touchdowns while throwing for another to Marvin Harrison Jr. in a total beatdown of Gang Green, the New York Jets, 31-6 in that one. And yeah, another strong performance by Murray and the Redbirds that has them in the conversation of a legitimate division frontrunner. So they keep first place in the NFC West. They continue to look strong in that one. So, yeah, I mean, for now at least, I'm going to their bye week. They got the momentum on their side. Kyler Murray, right back to pre-injury form. So he's been looking good so far. Meanwhile, for the other side, the other team, I told you so. I literally told all of you, like do not take that Jets win over the Texans seriously. Like the Jets, like they were desperate. They were like pretty much desperate for anything, and they were like, here we are. The next Sunday after, they were like right back to square one. Right back to square one of getting their butts handed to them. So, yeah, I don't know what to tell you, man. They're 3-7 on the season now. Like, they look lost, lifeless, just about everything you can imagine in the gangrene side of New York. Meanwhile, down in the Big D, the Eagles broke it open against the Dallas Cowboys. Jalen Hurts threw and ran for 2 touchdowns apiece. So Jalen Hurts had a pretty efficient day as the Eagles beat down the Cowboys 34-6 in another one of those blowout games in Week 10. So, but Jalen Hurts wasn't just the story of this game. It was the Philadelphia defense, notably the secondary, finally coming alive. And granted, it was they were playing the Cooper Rush-led offense mainly, but they were still relentless regardless. Thanks to the play of their rookies that they drafted, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell having a standout game. So overall, when you look at this performance by the Eagles, they did really well in this one. The major liability a year ago, well, here they are, looking a lot better now. Now they're going to need that kind of performance in just a very short amount of time against another NFC East team that we're going to talk about in the second part of this episode. Meanwhile, for the Dallas Cowboys, well, there's not really much for me to say about them because, well, it's never been more over than it already was for their season. Dak's season is officially over with the partially torn hamstring. You got 2 very bad options at quarterback with Cooper Rush and Trey Lance, unfortunately. Because coming from me as a Niners fan, like, fuck. I feel so bad for Trey Lance, dude. But unfortunately, they both sucked in this game against a backup Philadelphia defense. But, try as they might the rest of the way, Dallas and Jerry Jones, well, they went all in. But they're going to certainly go all in on the trip to Cancun in January. Just remember that they paid Dak Prescott $60 million to do it all. To do it all in, pal. Meanwhile, the Sunday Night Football game for this past week, the Detroit Lions, they had to overcome a 16-point deficit at halftime and a 5 Jared Goff interception performance as Jake Bates finished the comeback with a very long buzzer-beating field goal to beat the Houston Texans 26-23. Like, wow. Like, if you want to talk about grit, that was it by the Lions. Like, despite a throwback Jared Goff performance, like that was it. That was it, man. It's like Dan Campbell rallied his guys together, and he rallied Jared Goff to get his act together, and they pulled that off. Like, I'm impressed. That was a impressive victory from the Lions. Like, holy hell. Meanwhile, for the Texans, it's like, that was bad. That was a very bad choke job from them. Like, if you wanted to rid the stink of that performance from the Jets game, you had to have it here. And they did pretty good in the first half of this game, but why did everything from that disappear in the second half? But, damn. But when you look at this game, though, for the Texans, there were at least some positives offensively for this team. Like, you did get some emerging options like Tank Dell, Don Schultz, and hopefully next week you'll get Nico Collins back. So, at least when you look at it from the Texans side of things, you hope to get a viable receiving core going into that game in Dallas. Meanwhile, for the Monday Night Football game for this past week, The Miami Dolphins, their defense heavily limited Matthew Stafford in the Rams with a strong performance, which we'll talk about in just a bit. As Tua in the offense, they did just enough to widen the gap for an upset of sorts against the LA Rams, 23-15. And that Rams team, they really never did enough to get rid of them, primarily thanks to that offensive line, which they got their main people back, Steve Oliva and Jonah Jackson. But the problem was they did a lot of reshuffling in the offensive line, and that caused a lot of chemistry issues with Matthew Stafford in both Oliva's and Jonah Jackson's return game. So that caused serious issues, and that allowed the Dolphins, which had 4 sacks and 2 turnovers in that game, and that really caused Stafford to crack. So for the Rams that are trying to keep pace with the 49ers and the Cardinals in this NFC West race, yeah, that's not gonna fly. This loss, this is one that they shouldn't have had, looking at from their perspective. So they're gonna have to play catch up if they want to keep pace in this NFC West race. Meanwhile, for the Dolphins, I mean, not really a whole lot to say. I mean, yeah, like their offense still ticky-tacky. But their defense, though, like it might be the way going forward. Just have to keep in mind the Kendall Fuller injury, though. So that was their week. That was week number 10. Another dud in the NFL season, but there were a few highlights here and there. But yeah, not exactly exciting, in my opinion. But man, I wish there was some more excitement there, pal. But hopefully, December will ramp things up a bit. So before we get into the week that will be, let's get into our stars of the week. Starting with Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson. He's shown in this very defensive defensive-less game against the Cincinnati Bengals. 25 of 33 in his passing attempts, 290 yards, 4 total touchdowns, but still, stats don't always tell the story. He is very effective in this game. Made some nice decisions with the football, so he was also very effective. Meanwhile, the Dolphins defense had a field day against Matthew Stafford and shutting down that Rams offense. 4 sacks, 2 total turnovers, and only allowed field goals in that game, even though the stat board said 15 points. Meanwhile, Lions kicker Jake Bates, perfect on his field goals, 2 for 2. One of them being the 58-yard game-winning field goal to beat the Texans. So those are your stars of week number 10 here on Very Cold Lasagna. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Or you just don't care? Or maybe you do. You have a different star that you have in mind. I'd like to know that in the comments or a DM. Slide into those DMs, pal. Now let's get into the week that will be week number 11 of this 2024 campaign. Hopefully this week will be much better, please. I want to see some game-changing action. We haven't had that since week 8. Come on, I need something exciting, pal. and I'm kind of needing it. And we might get it with this game that I'm kind of been waiting for. But before we get into that hopefully exciting game that kicks off week number 11, we got to get into the teams that are going on vacay, bye-bye this week. And those teams are the Carolina Panthers, the New York Giants, the Tampa Bay Bucks, and the Arizona Cardinals. So if you're a fan of those teams, you get to spend a stress-free week off. And then they'll be back in action to give you more stress the following week. So now, let's get into the game that I'm excited for. Probably one of my most anticipated games since, well, they started doing good. And that's the Thursday Night Football game, only for that Jeff Bezos money, pal, of $15.99 a month. And that is the Washington Commanders taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. Both teams having the 7 wins. And this is a key major divisional showdown in the NFC East taking shape. Jane Daniels taking on Jalen Hurts in the link. Jane Daniels having a big test at hand against this Eagle squad. But the Commanders suffering a heartbreak to the Steelers. Full of rookie mistakes. They got to find a way to bounce back against an Eagles defense that's finally starting to find its stride. And well, pretty much just in general, this Eagles team as a whole finding its stride. So yeah, big test coming up for this Commanders team, and it should be a fun one. Like, I mean, I still have faith in Jay Daniels like doing well against this tough Eagles defense. So it should be an interesting NFC East game coming up this coming week. Then we have the Sunday slate of games, starting with the early morning portion. We have another key division matchup as the Green Bay Packers take on the Chicago Bears. Jordan Love and the Pack return from their bye week at 6-3. They begin a big stretch of games that begin in Chicago against a struggling Bears squad. Caleb Williams and that Bears offense really regressing to very conservative levels of play. They did recently fire Shane Waldron, their offense coordinator. Yes, Wussy Waldron is out of Chicago, and yeah, they've replaced him with, I forgot the name, but they replaced him with someone on Matt Eberflush's staff. That's hopefully better than Shane Waldron with whatever he was providing in the last couple of weeks, in the last 2 months. So yeah, against this Packers team, this is a game that Caleb Williams and the Bears need to have. They absolutely got to beat the Packers at home if they want to have any chance remaining in this tough NFC North. So they got to have it here if they want to stay alive in the NFC North. Meanwhile, despite last week's victory, the Lions look to improve on last week's sluggish start to that game against the Houston Texans when they welcome in the all-elite Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars, just like looking for silver linings at this point. They're not really going anywhere anymore. They probably won't have their starting quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, in this game. So it's probably going to be the Mac Jones show again. So, I mean, the Lions though, they shouldn't discount this Jaguars team though. Like, they got to be careful not to fall into the potential trap game. Just like, a couple weeks ago against the Tennessee Titans. So don't sleep on the wheel. You're 8-1. You're in control of the NFC North. Just, be wary. Meanwhile, down in Miami, the Miami Dolphins at 3-6, they look to follow up their upset win over the Rams. They return home to face the Las Vegas Raiders at 2-7, coming off their bye week. The Raiders pretty much looking for any kind of answer on offense, whether it's from Gardner Minshew or Desmond Ridder. Pretty much anything, just to finish this wretched season along for Las Vegas. Meanwhile, down in Foxborough, the Rams travel to New England, hoping to rebound from the bummer of a loss to Miami when they take on this rebuilding Patriots squad who have won their last 2 or 3 with Drake May under center. Drake May looking pretty solid despite a very crappy supporting cast. The last win coming against the Chicago Bears and Caleb Williams. So let's see how they do against this Rams team still trying to compete for the NFC West. Meanwhile, down in the Big Hard, interim coach Darren Rizzi searching for his second straight win with the New Orleans Saints at 3-7. And, well, he could get just that when the visiting Cleveland Browns at 2-7 come into the Big Hard. So, not a whole lot interested in this matchup, but it's something to watch out for, I suppose. Meanwhile, another big division matchup takes place in Week 11 as the Pittsburgh Steelers at 7-2 face a major divisional test against the Baltimore Ravens at 7-3, who also face a major divisional test as these two supposed powerhouses in the AFC North collide for the first time in their first of 2 meetings. So we're also going to find out just how legit Russell Wilson will be against this kind of team in the Baltimore Ravens. So already we already have 3 key divisional matchups to start our weekend. So should be fun. Meanwhile, the Minnesota Vikings at 7-2 continue their AFC South road trip, hoping to get better red zone play and turnover-free performances from Sam Darnold when they visit Will Levis and the Tennessee Titans at 2-7. Will Levis, he did all right last week against the LA Chargers, but certainly still not enough to inspire confidence long term at quarterback for Tennessee. Meanwhile, down in the gangrene side of New York, Shane Steichen and the Indianapolis Colts. Well, I mean, at this point, you just gotta hope Shane Steichen finally stops being stubborn, but he's still gonna keep on insisting to keep starting Joe Flacco for another week as he takes the Colts down to the gangrene side of the Meadowlands to face this lifeless Jets team and Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, pretty much that. Talking about the late afternoon slate of games, Kirk Cousins and the Falcons. Well, they gotta bounce back from a disappointing performance in New Orleans. The Falcons at 6-4. They hold a 4-1 division record in the NFC South, but nothing is safe and secure. For as much as I've been saying, they got this on lock, right? But yeah, they still got to win these games. And awaiting them next is a Broncos team that was just a blocked field goal away from giving the defending Super Bowl champion Chiefs their first loss of the year. The Denver Broncos, starting to become a tough out for whether they win or lose going forward. So yeah, Kirk Cousins, the Falcons, cannot sleep on this team. They got to win this one to prevent a total collapse of that lead in the NFC South. Meanwhile, down in Santa Clara, the Seattle Seahawks return from their bye at 4-5, looking to get back on serious track, especially on offense. And they got to hope that DK Metcalf returns, hopefully not to heavily lie and save that offense. But anyway, they face a 49ers team also looking to get out of its funk because, well, they're still looking funky coming out of that game against Tampa Bay. But anyway, these two face each other in a rematch from week 6 as both teams looking for momentum in this NFC West race. So this is a game that both teams got to have. Meanwhile, down in Buffalo, a rematch from last year's AFC divisional game, the undefeated Chiefs at 9-0, they head back into hostile territory to take on Josh Allen, the Bills, who are looking to avenge some part of their own downfall from last year's said game. So, yeah, a game for all the world to see in prime time afternoon. But the Bills, they got to have this one. Like, seriously. Sure, it's a regular season game, but don't you think you want to get some kind of advantage if you're going to face this Chiefs team again in the playoffs? Like, you got to have it, especially with how the Chiefs have been playing, but then yet again still winning. Just saying. Meanwhile, the Sunday Night Football game for week number 11, certainly an interesting one to get flexed in. But anyway, Joe Burrow and the Bengals hope to keep their fading playoff hopes alive at 4-6, but standing in their way next is a Chargers offense that's kind of been flying under the radar in the last month at 6-3. The Chargers offense playing relatively well. I take that back. Playing pretty good. They've been playing pretty good as of late. So this should be an interesting matchup. Let's see what the Chargers are made of against an actual team in the Bengals. So we'll see. Then we have the Monday Night Football game to wrap up week number 11 in the Battle of Texas. CJ Stroud and this Texans team at 6-4, they got to snap this 2-game funk, man. Like, especially after blowing last week's game against the Lions in the way they did. Like, they got to have it here against a beat up and demoralized team like the Cooper Rush and the Cowboys. You somehow don't win this game against Dallas at 3-6. Like, we got to be asking questions about this team and in Houston. Like, the hell? Like, we got to be having those hard, uncomfortable conversations about CJ Stroud and the Texans. But yeah, this is a game that the Texans got to have in this Monday Night Football game to close out week number 11. But let me know your thoughts on the upcoming week 11 slate. Let's have a conversation about it. It's on YouTube, or slide into those DMs at Very Cold Lasagna. And let me know about the week that was, week number 10, your thoughts, your opinions, your expectations or disappointments that were met, unmet, from your team, other teams. Let's have a conversation about whether it's week 10 or week 11 in the comments or on socials at Very Cold Lasagna. But anyway, that is it for this episode of Very Cold Lasagna. I am your host, Dylan Lasagna, signing out of another episode number 228 of this icy yet spicy podcast for all the filthy casual takes on the world of sports. We'll be back with another round of the weekly NFL 24-4 roundup with the week that was, and the week that will be. But until then, I'll see you in the next one. Lasagna, very cold and in the fridge. And until I see ya, might not see ya in the next episode. Peace out.